I watched in disbelief as 3 men in fake police uniforms blocked my mother's car from using the main road into our neighborhood. "You people don't belong here," one sneered at her while pointing to a resident-only sign that wasn't there yesterday. My blood boiled as I realized this was the 5th time in 2 weeks they'd targeted her. All because she was black in a neighborhood they decided she didn't fit into. They didn't know they were messing with a Navy SEAL's mother, but they were about to find out. Before we start the story, please comment down from which country are you watching and don't forget to subscribe. My name is James Wilson, Lieutenant with the Navy SEALs, and I've faced enemy fire in 3 combat zones without flinching. But seeing those HOA security guards harass my mom as I pulled up behind her car awakened something far more dangerous than fear: cold, calculated determination. "Ma'am, this entrance is for approved residents only," the tallest guard said, his hand resting on what looked like a real police baton. "You'll need to use the service entrance around back." Mom's voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling on the steering wheel. "I've lived here for 8 months. I showed you my resident pass yesterday and the day before." "Well, there seem to be some concerns about whether your papers are in order," another guard chimed in with a smirk. "Several homeowners have reported suspicious activity." I stepped out of my car, still in my Navy uniform after driving straight from base. The surprise on their faces would have been comical if the situation wasn't so infuriating. "Is there a problem with my mother using this public road?" I asked, my voice carrying the calm that my teammates recognize as the prelude to action. This wasn't a one-time incident. Over coffee that night, Mom revealed the pattern of harassment that had become her daily reality since moving to Oakwood Estates. "They follow me when I walk to the community mailbox," she said quietly. "Last week they demanded to see my ID when I was sitting by the community pool. Nobody else was asked. Yesterday they told me my car didn't have the right permit, even though it's clearly displayed." As she spoke, I noticed how she'd stopped gardening in the front yard, her favorite hobby. The rose bushes she'd planted when she first moved in were withering from neglect. She'd stopped taking evening walks. Started parking her car in the garage instead of the driveway. They had made my mother, a retired school principal who had spent 40 years shaping young minds, feel like an intruder in her own home. "Tell me everything," I said, opening my laptop. "Names, times, exact words they've used. We're going to document all of it." The look in her eyes, part relief, part worry, told me she had been suffering in silence, not wanting to worry me while I was serving. Mom pulled out a small notebook from her purse. She'd been keeping track despite her fear. Smart woman, always had been. "The leader calls himself Chief Brennan," she said, sliding a photo across the table. "He's not a real police officer, but the HOA hired his private security company last year. The other 2 are Mike Denton and Travis Reeves. They patrol in vehicles with lights that look like police cars." I recognized Brennan from the confrontation earlier. Tall, mid-50s, with the fading muscle of someone who might have been in law enforcement years ago but now coasted on intimidation. "What exactly does their contract with the HOA authorize them to do?" I asked. Mom shook her head. "That's just it. Nobody seems to know. When Mrs. Patel from down the street complained about them accosting her teenage son, the HOA president said they have broad discretion to maintain community standards." I jotted down notes. Community standards was the oldest euphemism in the book. "Have they ever physically touched you before today?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Her hesitation told me everything. "They grabbed my arm last week when I was walking Einstein," she said, referring to her aging golden retriever. "Said I needed a special permit to walk dogs on community property." I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself like I'd been trained. "Did you report it?" "To whom?" "The actual police said it was a civil matter since they didn't injure me. The HOA board is chaired by Brennan's brother-in-law." I stood up and paced the kitchen. Mom had bought this house after Dad passed, wanting to downsize but still have room for me when I visited between deployments. She paid a premium for what the brochure called peace of mind and exclusive amenities. "I'm staying for 2 weeks, I said. "My leave just started." She tried to object, saying I shouldn't waste my vacation dealing with neighborhood politics, but I cut her off gently. "This isn't politics, Mom. This is harassment. And it ends now." The next morning I woke before dawn, old habits, and went for a run through the neighborhood. Tactical reconnaissance disguised as exercise. I noted camera positions, access points, and the schedule of the security patrols. By 7 a.m., I had mentally mapped the entire operation. Back at Mom's house, I prepared breakfast while she slept in. When she came downstairs, I had coffee waiting and a plan forming. "I want to try something," I said. Today we'll go about your normal routine together. I want to see how they operate firsthand. Mom hesitated. James, these men are petty and vindictive. If you confront them, they might make things worse after you leave. I squeezed her hand. I'm not going to confront them. Not yet. First we document. Build our case. Then we act decisively. She nodded, recognizing the approach I'd described from my training. In the SEAL teams, we never went in without proper intelligence. Besides, I added, trying to lighten the mood, I've dealt with warlords and terrorists. How bad can a few rent-a-cops be? Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. That afternoon we headed to the community pool. Mom had stopped going weeks ago after one too many random ID checks, but today she packed her swimming bag with quiet determination. We found 2 lounge chairs in a prime spot. The pool was half full, mostly with families and retirees enjoying the perfect weather. I counted 3 other black residents among the 40-some people present. Each sat slightly apart from the clusters of conversation. We hadn't been there 20 minutes when I spotted Denton and Reeves entering the pool area. They scanned the crowd, eyes landing on Mom with the laser focus of predators spotting prey. Right on schedule, I murmured, activating the voice recorder on my phone. They approached directly, ignoring everyone else. Ma'am, we need to see your resident ID, Denton said loudly enough for nearby sunbathers to hear. Mom reached into her bag and produced her resident card, the same one they'd checked countless times before. This doesn't look right, Reeves said, examining it closely. There's a new hologram security feature on current passes. Pure fabrication. I checked the HOA bylaws that morning. No such update existed. Excuse me, I interjected calmly. Is there a problem? Denton turned, noticing me for the first time. HOA security, sir. Routine verification. Interesting, I said, leaning forward. Because I count 17 other adults in this pool area, and you haven't asked any of them for ID. What's your selection criteria? The question hung in the air. A few nearby conversations stopped. We have reports of unauthorized persons using community facilities, Reeves said stiffly. What reports? From whom? When filed? I fired back, still smiling pleasantly. I'd like to see the incident log, please. Denton's face darkened. We don't answer to residents. Actually, you do, came a voice from behind us. An elderly white woman in a floral swimsuit approached. That's exactly who you answer to. We pay for your services through our HOA fees. I recognized her from Mom's description. Margaret Wilkins, a widow who'd lived in the community since it was built. Ms. Wilson is my neighbor and friend, she continued. I've invited her to play bridge every Thursday for months. If you have questions about her residency, you can direct them to me. Other voices joined in. The Patels from down the street. The Garcias from the cul-de-sac. Residents stepping forward, forming a protective circle around my mother. Denton and Reeves retreated, muttering about following procedures, but the damage to their authority was done. Community members exchanged phone numbers with Mom, sharing similar stories of harassment. As we walked home, Mom squeezed my arm. That wasn't just luck, was it? I smiled. I may have knocked on a few doors this morning while you were getting ready. Tactical alliance building. Over the next 3 days we built our case meticulously. I gathered evidence. Security footage from neighbors' doorbell cameras showing the guards following Mom, written statements from residents who'd witnessed harassment, copies of the HOA contract specifying the actual limits of security personnel authority. Most damning was the pattern. The security team consistently targeted the few non-white residents while ignoring actual rule violations by others. The Rodriguez family had been cited for unauthorized gatherings when hosting their daughter's birthday. Mrs. Patel received warnings about exotic cooking odors. Meanwhile, the Thompsons' ongoing construction project that violated noise ordinances continued unbothered. I consulted discreetly with a JAG attorney friend from my unit. Her assessment was blunt. This isn't just HOA overreach, it's textbook discrimination with potential civil rights violations. Mom worried about the cost of legal action. I assured her that wasn't our first move. In the teams we have a saying, why use a missile when a knife will do? We're going to start with precision. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at the community center. Attendance was typically sparse, a fact the current leadership exploited to maintain control. Not tonight. When we arrived, the parking lot was full. Residents filled every chair, lined the walls, and spilled into the hallway. Many faces I recognized from our information-gathering mission. At the front table sat the 5-member HOA board, including Jeffrey Hartwell, Brennan's brother-in-law and board president. Brennan himself stood at the side, arms crossed, his security team flanking him. Hartwell called the meeting to order, visibly unsettled by the turnout. He tried to rush through the agenda until Margaret Wilkins raised her hand. "I believe we have a special item to discuss," she said firmly. "The behavior of our security contractors." Hartwell attempted to deflect. "Security matters aren't appropriate for open discussion due to confidentiality." "Actually," I interjected, standing up, "the HOA bylaws specifically state that any expenditure of community funds must be transparent to all members. We pay $150,000 annually for this security service." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Many hadn't realized the cost. "Who exactly are you?" Brennan demanded, stepping forward. "James Wilson, Lieutenant, United States Navy SEALs," I replied calmly. "And son of Diana Wilson, who has been systematically harassed by your team since she moved here." I motioned to Mom, who stood with dignity as neighbors nodded in support. "These are serious allegations," Hartwell sputtered. "They are," I agreed. "Which is why we've documented everything." I distributed folders to each board member. Inside you'll find witness statements from 23 residents describing targeted harassment based on race. Video evidence of selective enforcement. Comparisons of citation rates showing minority residents are 8 times more likely to be stopped. And most concerning, evidence that your security personnel have been impersonating law enforcement officers, a federal offense. Brennan stepped forward aggressively. "You can't come in here and threaten us." "It's not a threat," I replied evenly. "It's evidence. The kind that would be very compelling to the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Or perhaps local media." The room fell silent. "We're not here for confrontation," Mom said, her voice strong. "We're here because this community deserves better. Because our children shouldn't grow up watching their parents be humiliated for existing in their own neighborhood." One by one, residents stood to share their experiences. Mrs. Patel described being followed to her car after dark. Mr. Rodriguez recounted how guards disrupted his daughter's quinceañera preparations. Margaret Wilkins detailed how her black grandchildren were questioned when visiting her. The stories built a devastating picture. Brennan's face grew increasingly red. Hartwell looked stunned, perhaps genuinely unaware of the extent of the problem. When the testimonies concluded, I stepped forward again. "We proposed 3 immediate actions. First, terminate the contract with Brennan Security effective immediately. Second, establish a resident oversight committee for any future security measures. Third, implement bias training for all HOA representatives." Brennan exploded. "This is ridiculous. We're protecting property values and community standards. By terrorizing legitimate residents?" I countered. "Strange definition of protection." "You don't understand what we're dealing with," he snapped. "Crime rates in neighboring communities are completely unrelated to harassing homeowners and their families," I finished for him. "I've spent my career analyzing actual security threats. This isn't security. It's profiling." The board called a recess to confer. When they returned, Hartwell looked pale. "The board has voted to suspend the security contract pending investigation," he announced. "Additionally, we will form a resident committee to review all security protocols moving forward." It wasn't total victory, but it was a start. The community erupted in applause. Brennan stormed out, his team trailing behind him. I should have anticipated retaliation. 2 days later, Mom called me while I was picking up groceries. "They're at the house," she whispered. "Brennan and his men. They say they're conducting a final property inspection before their contract ends. James, they're taking pictures inside our home." I dropped everything and raced back. When I arrived, Brennan's security vehicle was parked in the driveway. The front door stood ajar. Inside, I found Mom standing in the living room, hands shaking but chin raised defiantly. Brennan and Denton were rifling through desk drawers while Reeves photographed the room. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I asked from the doorway. They spun around. Brennan recovered first. "Final security inspection as authorized by the HOA contract." "No such provision exists," I said, entering the room slowly. "You are trespassing in a private residence." "Mom, did you give them permission to enter?" "Absolutely not," she said firmly. "They pushed past me when I answered the door." Denton smirked. "She invited us in. It's your word against ours." "Actually," I replied, pointing to the small camera mounted on the bookshelf, "it's your word against the security system I installed 2 days ago. The one that's been live streaming to cloud storage since you entered." The color drained from their faces. Here's what happens next, I continued. You leave immediately. The actual police have already been called. And tomorrow, your company will be facing not just contract termination, but criminal charges for breaking and entering, intimidation, and if I'm feeling particularly thorough, civil rights violations. Brennan stepped toward me, his considerable size meant to intimidate. You think you're so smart playing soldier? Navy SEAL, I corrected calmly. And I'm not playing anything. I'm protecting my mother in her home. Something you've actively prevented her from feeling since she moved here. The distant wail of police sirens made the decision for them. They pushed past us and fled before the patrol cars arrived. The aftermath unfolded swiftly. The responding officers, viewing our security footage, filed charges against Brennan and his team. The HOA board, faced with potential liability for the actions of their contractors, voted unanimously to terminate the security contract permanently. Within a week, 3 board members including Hartwell resigned. The reconstituted board, now including Margaret Wilkins and Mr. Rodriguez, implemented new guidelines for community governance that emphasized inclusivity and transparency. The criminal charges against Brennan and his team resulted in plea deals that permanently barred them from security work. The civil suit that followed, joined by 17 families from the community, created a settlement fund for those who had faced discrimination. Most importantly, the neighborhood changed. Block parties emerged. Children played together on front lawns. Residents walked their dogs and stopped to chat regardless of skin color. Mom's roses bloomed again as she tended them without fear. The community newsletter featured her gardening tips. The Patels and Wilkins became regular visitors for Sunday dinners. 6 months later, on my next leave, I returned to a transformed neighborhood. Mom greeted me with a hug at the main entrance, the same spot where I'd witnessed her being harassed. Welcome home, she said, eyes bright with the confidence that had defined her throughout my childhood. As we drove through the neighborhood, she pointed out changes. The imposing security booth had been converted into a little free library. The community center hosted cultural exchange events. The pool area displayed a new sign, all residents welcome, no ID required. You know what the best part is? Mom asked as we pulled into her driveway. I'm not special anymore. I'm just another neighbor. That evening, as neighbors stopped by to welcome me home, I realized Mom was right. The extraordinary effort had produced the most ordinary result. People living together with basic dignity and respect. Sometimes justice looks like nothing special happening at all. Before returning to my unit, I attended the HOA meeting where Mom was voted in as the new board president. Standing in the back of the room, watching her confidently address the community she'd fought to be accepted in, I felt a different kind of pride than any military accomplishment had given me. Some battles aren't fought on foreign soil but on your own doorstep. And sometimes, the most important victory is winning back what should have been yours all along, the right to simply belong. As I hugged Mom goodbye, she whispered, "Maybe now you can use your leave for an actual vacation." I smiled. This was exactly where I needed to be. In the rearview mirror as I drove away, I watched Mom chat with neighbors on her front lawn, no longer an outsider but the heart of a community that had found its conscience. Justice doesn't always arrive with sirens and uniforms. Sometimes it comes quietly in the form of neighbors standing together, demanding better from each other. And sometimes, it takes a Navy SEAL to show that the real battle worth fighting is the one that ensures everyone can come home to peace.